think we're in business.
I know, that's why I had to pull them out, I was like.
I heard that whole discussion, but that's
I'll
just make sure you have to
Yeah,
scoot in every time I
learn
do
from
that.
me, don't do that.
You're very tiny.
So human sized.
Okay. We decided not to tilt the camera, but it is, and it is working. Good.
I have coffee.
Oh, did you?
Thank you.
It's sitting right next to me now that I'm not waiting for my new friend Renita to text me that she's here.
Thank you.
Did you get the pictures? Okay, it printed for me. I heard Rachel say hers printed a little weird, so mine did too.
No, mine did simply because I did something silly. I let Dropbox print for me, I should
Oh,
have done
never.
that.
No,
It
no,
doesn't
it
print.
needs to stay in its lane.
It does.
It just needs to
Well,
store
storage.
things.
Just-
Yeah.
all it is
Just
cloud.
It needs to
Storage.
store things. There you go.
Thank you.
Shouldn't try to multitask.
I don't know if we have one already. Okay, that was our, just for the
My
video.
waiver.
Yes.
I
it-
promise you, when I got your email last night, I was like, really? Now they're recording?
Oh,
I didn't
No,
have enough
this is-
service.
just
Yeah.
to get it to everybody.
I know,
This is for internal use only, and it's really helpful for us too, like, oh, here's what was actually discussed, because when someone says, what questions were asked, I'm like, oh, great ones, great questions were asked.
Yeah. My parents' signature.
You doing all right? Yeah.
Don't you want to join us at the meeting?
Well, I do, but I'm just gonna, you just kind of keep it.
We
on
have
the
one
door.
more guest coming from the church, so he's just kind of being very hospitable.
But thank you for offering, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I like this pen. It's true. I have a different pen. Back with tricks.
Yes.
Wow.
Thanks.
Hold on, yeah, you need to keep it for standing purposes. I don't need it back, that's okay, I trust you.
We still waiting for someone else?
We don't have to wait for him.
Oh,
He can-
okay.
He can join us when he, if you guys have everyone.
Yeah, we do.
Yes, we have everyone, and I'm gonna double check my phone before I say that, and someone says, I'm at the wrong place. No, we're okay, we're okay.
I thank you for being flexible, that was, yeah.
Certainly not your fault.
Well, no, and it's not their, you know, it's not your fault over at once either.
Just
It's
hate that it
No,
happens.
it just-
unpredictable, and we were just talking about the security issues kind of the other night at churches, and we could have all faced, and then, you know, so, it happens.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Well, do we want to just, I guess, go around and
Yeah, let's
introduce?
introduce ourselves.
Okay. You want to, I can start.
Okay.
I'm Noelle Stevenson Jai, I'm part of United Way staff.
Hey, I'm Reverend Renee Griffin. I'm the pastor at Wentz Memorial United Church of Christ.
I'm Ryan Thrasher, I'm the pastor at First Christian Church, Disciples of Christ.
And I'm Rick Frazier. I am a lay member of Wentz Memorial United Church of Christ.
Kim Pettigrew, Coordinator of Faith-Based Community Engagement, United Way.
Alana James, and Director of Community-Based Collaborations, i.e. Place Matters at United Way.
I'm Pusha David. I'm serving as AmeriCorps Vista, United Way.
I'm Monica Banks. I don't know what to share. I am a current 2.5-year student at Wake Forest School of Divinity. I am a candidate for ordination with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I am a member of this church, and this First Christian will be my ordaining congregation, and I'm also part of the food and faith kind of convivium group at Wake Forest. And I have about about 20 years in the restaurant business. And I also work overnights with Citywood Dwellings, and I'm a shelter monitor with the homeless population here in Winston-Salem as well.
Oh, wow.
So I think the other questions will kind of resolve themselves.
Great.
I'm Rachel Damaris. I am a board member and on the Place Matters Committee as a United Way board liaison. So.
I'm Brett Marchant with United Way staff.
And Doug Atkinson will be arriving. He is a former church moderator. Is he an elder right now?
He is an elder in the
He's an
church.
elder of our church. He is also has a lot of experience in healthcare consulting and has worked with Faith Health quite a bit. So that's why we chose him.
So this, the site visit is really the opportunity for the applicant to share with us, information that you know, either we didn't ask or that you didn't feel like you had space to share in the application. What we sent from a question standpoint was follow-ups, clarification, things that, you know, we didn't want to infer too much, obviously, because we can't speak for the intention of the applicant. But we make sure to do that ahead of time so that we have this time for you to really, to kind of brag a little bit, to expound on the work itself and to tell us a little bit more. The seat's open.
Doug, it's
Oh.
open for your
Yeah.
reference.
Sorry, I'm late. Raining.
Yes. And to expound a little bit more, if you can, on, you know, how the proposal came together. A lot of our questions were related to, you know, the restaurant business and just in general about the knowledge and expertise that you bring to the proposal and how the collaboration will look from a kind of, you know, client flow standpoint. We talk about how the activities really support what your intended outcome is. And, you know, so those are things that we get from the application, that we get from the questions, and you know, it's kind of up to you to start with, to expound a little bit more, and like I said, the elevator pitch a little bit.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna start with this prayer that I have kind of fallen in love with and sort of co-written, and, you know, so some of it's mine, some of it's not, but it kind of speaks to where I think that the intersections between faith and food and the restaurant and kind of sustainability kind of all start to happen. On the table, I kind of preface it, we have kind of our communion set up. I went to Israel with Wake Forest last year and just am still kind of figuring out how that trip has impacted me, both in my understanding of the Christian movement globally, what it's like to be a refugee, and then also just the complicated political things that happen. But that chalice and paten are pretty significant because they came from there, but they're pretty significant for our faith too. We celebrate communion every Sunday as disciples of Christ, and communion has always just kind of been a part of my life, and I think the ritual of communion is really important to me, but I also think how we approach that ritual and understanding of the Eucharist for people who are underfed, underemployed, don't have a grocery store within 8 miles, work in a restaurant that they can't afford to eat in, those kind of things is really, really important to me as a minister. So that being said, we have our communion set up there, and then I offer some grapes and some bread, and I'm going to offer this prayer. Pray with me if you will. If not, if you could just listen for a few moments. O God of seed and harvest, creator of all that has been offered, giver of blessings and justice, we come to this table mindful of your graciousness and the work we are called to do. It is truly a miracle that we have been called to share this space. The Kansas wheat, poultry from Alabama, corn from Iowa, potatoes from Idaho, fruit from California, becomes us. Our eyes, our hearts, our hands, our bodies, alive with cells and juices of our muscles. Bones and flesh are created and nourished by the food from your bountiful hand. Yet we recognize that so many of your children in our local and global community experience not this bounty, but a drought of access to food, water, community resources, and even relationships. Keep us mindful today of workers whose labor makes our meals possible. May the nourishment of this traveler's meal, this simple bread and grapes, strengthen us to work for justice and equity in a compassionate and merciful way among those who labor in the fields, on our streets, in our homes, in our prisons, and in workplaces. Amen.
Amen.
So, I want to say this just to give you a little bit of background and to be very, I'm nothing if I'm not honest. This started out as a group project for Mark Jensen's Food and Faith. It's a formative kind of intersectional class that is a required course for the certificate in either in food and faith or faith and health and wellness of the public. We were supposed to potentially write this as if kind of grant proposal. And I guess for me, I kept saying, well, why would I write an as if when there's potential to do real work? And I guess part of me has tired a little bit of academia and the suppositions and the pontifications and the propositions that we make in the classroom. If they're only valid there, and if they don't have any real praxis to change lives, to change us and offer transformation, for me, it just wasn't, it's just being, it was just I was getting a little weary of that process. So I approached Dr. Jensen and said, well, so we're looking at all this data from the United Way, and most of which I'm pretty familiar with. I came to Wake Forest because of the Food and Faith program, but also because of the condition of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County and this region of the country in regard to access to food. I grew up very, very poor and spent 20 years in a restaurant that, unless I was managing the restaurant, I couldn't afford to eat there. Once you're managing, you get a little bit more. I have fed my children from food pantries, and it has not always been the most, not easy to navigate, but it's also kind of a shameful experience sometimes. And I have felt very called as our life circumstances have changed, and as I've grown into this call and becoming a disciple and kind of really discerning what that means for me as a minister in how we integrate our faith and our theology and what we think about God into how we sit around and share a table. So that's kind of, and Mark's like, well, I don't think you know what writing a grant's like, and I'm like, no, I know. And so he kind of cautioned me there, and then it was of course a group project, and we all have worked in groups. And as you see, my group members have kind of fallen away a little bit. So they were very instrumental in the writing of the grant. But once that was kind of submitted, that was our final project. So that's kind of where a lot of this, and some of that's not through their own fault or doing. I mean, they're working at Baptist as chaplains, they are doing other things in their program, so it perhaps also wasn't as close to their heart and their faith experience as it is for mine. In that, in our research, we narrowed down probably what we saw was the most at need, or what would be the most, where we could improve the circumstances the most, and yet where there was someone who was doing some pretty great work over there already. And I know Reverend Maria Jones from doing CPE at Baptist this summer, and it's really, really weird how these relationships kind of flesh out. But she also, the chiropractor that is in our, is also my chiropractor, and he does y'all's wellness
Our health fair.
fairs. Yeah, and he has made me be able to sustain grad school and kept my migraines. So there are these relationships that have already existed, and Disciples of Christ and the United Church of Christ are kind of sister, brother, we're related denominationally, but we also do a lot of ministry work together as well.
we come from the same movement, and we could go into the history of that, but it just, it made sense to try to locate a congregation that was doing that kind of work, centered around food and wellness and nutrition and poverty ministries in the community that we wanted to work in. Secondarily, I think that it helps that not only are we related by our faith, we're kind of these mirror images of each other in terms of our congregations. We are here at First Christian, we are a primarily white congregation that kind of mirrors the community that we live in. I know that Wentz is a primarily African American congregation, but is also, I don't know what you call that, nesting, the Hispanic church? You may call it hosting, I think we call it nesting. But so it again mirrors their community that they are kind of uniquely situated in. And our congregation, the members here really feel compelled to do work in poverty ministry. I've had our congregants come serve a meal at the shelter. We have very close relationships with crisis control. In fact, I'm pretty sure Becky Minnick sits on the board, or at least did at one time. Our members, we've got the food and beverage director of the convention center goes to this congregation. So it just, these partnerships just really kind of started to make sense in a way that I couldn't have specifically sought out had I tried. But it just really made sense. So I came up with the idea to do a mobile food pantry, and I've been considering that for a really long time. I think it's still really unconscionable that we're building a Publix over here where we have all these other, but that's another discussion. And I think just from the beginning, I think a lot of it centers around access for me. We talked about, and you all had, I don't know who posed the individual question, have posed the question, and that's where we kind of say pantry/market. I don't think we know what this is going to look like yet, and I think I could speak to it as much as I can, but I think once we hit the ground running, we modify as we go. I think initially it operates as a pantry, and as people feel held by their community, as people gain the resources for employment and want, and still just don't have access, but maybe have financial resources. Reverend Renee and I talked about really offering an opportunity to offer a donation or something of the sort, but I think initially it just needs to be something where people have access to food and produce, fresh ingredients to cook a meal for their children, that is as accessible, as economical as going through the dollar menu at any of our, because there is access to that. And that's not the choice, I mean, but as a parent and I, formerly a single mother, I know that those are choices that when you can feed your kids, and that's what you got, that's what you work with. So we have, and I will give you this at the end, and I'm not giving it to you now because that's what I was kind of told to do by people that gave me feedback. I've listed kind of the resources that we considered and the people we talked to. Nashville Food Project is somebody that I think is a great model because it didn't start out as Nashville Food Project. It started out as a bunch of different organizations that were able to combine their resources and serve a greater need in their community with their independent kind of professional skills and things. You can have my resume when we're done. I've spent almost 20 years I had a minor stint in retail, but but most of my life has been spent in restaurants. My first job was at a local restaurant, and I was a shift manager by the time I was 16 years old. I've lived my entire life in restaurants. And I know how to open one in my sleep. I know how to do things in back of the house, but I also know how to find the right people that are better equipped to do that. Carl Brown is a former Wake Div graduate, and he is also a chef, and he has been someone we've talked to, but I know that he would this is kind of jumping from the mobile pantry to the restaurant. So, a mobile pantry is really hard to sustain. It doesn't generate money. It's pretty labor intensive in terms of
You have to have a lot of city planning involved about routes, locations, there's gotta be drivers, stocking the pantry, probably, what I noticed most about my kind of pre-site visit with Wentz is it's a really small church, like physical space is really small. And you guys are doing a massive amount of missional work from basically a closet, if you don't mind my, and what I feel most equipped to do here is to see where you're doing the work, and First Christian has a lot of space. And we have the space to do storage, and our people can, and volunteers can office out of here. We can have, we just have the space here, and the van can fill up from here and go to that location, wherever we decide those. I mean, obviously, one of which is gonna be the parking lot at Wentz, and we'll figure out what that looks like. But the other thing is, you know the community so much better than we do, and I think it's just, it would be presumptive and obnoxious for us to go in as a church and be like, oh, we wanna feed people over here. Well, you guys know the community, you know who shows up on a weekly or monthly basis. You also know what people like to eat. That is different than, potentially what we like to eat over on this end of town. Or what families are just used to getting that we can kind of create that continuum with. The restaurant portion of it is still, I'm working with a consultant chef friend of mine in Kansas City, and he's helping me kind of create a pretty economical model. But one day a week we'll offer free and reduced cost meals to those in need in the community. The other 6 days it's gonna operate just like a normal restaurant, generating profit to fund the mobile market. There will always be in the space, there's a community table that's open all the time, and that community table isn't a charity table. It's a table that is in the center so that we can have community and shared meals with each other and the people that are sharing that space with us. I know that Sweet Potatoes has a community table certain days of the week. We went to Raleigh last weekend, part of which was for my birthday, but the other part was I kind of really wanted to check out, her name is Ashley Christensen, and all of her restaurants have that as well. And she's not running a nonprofit restaurant. It's really about just having one foot in your community and giving people the space for these connections that they're really looking for. I think the model of the restaurant is going to be very tight as far as space. I've looked at a couple locations over there and have a couple options of low lease programs or even 6 months not paying a lease. But it's really going to be centered around a tight menu to where it keeps our costs down. My friend in Kansas City came up with a concept, and he asked if there were any places in Winston that did just chicken and waffles. And I have looked, and there's no place that just does that. But he came up with this really cool idea that it would be, you'd have savory waffles around Thanksgiving. You'd make waffles out of stuffing or what, it would just be, breakfast waffles, dinner waffles, and it would just be something that was pretty simple to navigate as far as food costs, but also I think it speaks to the community and the needs and what doesn't exist in the market already. So
They're able to take food home, but they also come to the pantry, so, absolutely.
Community gardens are just tough. They're just
It's a
tough.
lot of
People
work.
love them in the spring, and then they're also tough with different ethnic groups too, for very different reasons. But the answer to your question is yes, and anyone who wants to offer, we would gladly take it and find space for it and find hungry people. Yeah. And if we don't have people who know what to do with those ingredients, I think long term, part of what we want to offer with the restaurant space is to have kind of a demo kitchen that would offer courses and classes for, we're growing turnips, or we're growing this. What do we do with that? What can that look like? What can you do with spaghetti squash and use it as a pasta and put sauce all over it, and your kids now eating spaghetti squash, which is just crazy. But I think part of it is looking at the big picture, and absolutely, and that would be an ideal problem to have. But that's part of the list as we're starting to compile those organizations and those groups, and they have
here there is a garden back
We
there that they're kind
have,
of
we have a
regenerating.
smaller community garden, we don't have a lot of land, but as far as
Yeah,
land is
what-
concerned, we have a couple of community gardens, we have, two master gardeners, actually, who, are very, very dedicated to it, and use it, we use a lot, we donate most of that produce to the backpack program, actually, that's run by Second Harvest. But we could easily, share that with, New Communion, should that be him.
Yeah. But for sure, and I think running the restaurant this way as a nonprofit also allows the sourcing of the ingredients not to just be through purveyors. And that's a tricky thing to be able to do and to position yourself to be able to do, is to be able to use those donations to run a restaurant.
Yeah, something that, a lot of discussion, and this is across the board, around, the ideas that this is a pilot year for this initiative, and being able to see ideas that can grow, to seed that idea and then grow it, and of course, from the partnership to the ownership, which, we can hear that discussion, and, I think getting a better understanding of what the opportunities are that you'll position yourself to be able to take into the future, I think is, something that we're starting to kind of hear a little bit more of. And which was why my question was about,
Yeah.
is it absolutely restaurant and mobile pantry to start with, or, are you able to phase it in different ways? And
I think it'll be phased in. I think a restaurant to find the proper location that's agreeable to all the people involved, that people not only want to frequent but want to work at, that is accessible to deliveries, that has the proper that is a natural phasing in. But I think it's sooner rather than later. It's not, and I think if it gets too far off the radar, I think we forget that that's what's gonna make this really sustainable from the mobile unit. Otherwise, churches there's the whole volunteer fatigue with people I volunteer for this every week, and I am a parent and this and that and the other. Plus, and there's just our limited financial and fiscal resources. And I think I'm trying to avoid this just being another program that we're asking churches to support.
Well, and if I can just entertain why First Christian is involved, I think that's the piece of it for us, or at least touches on it. We have a lot of programs that help hungry people in our church. The piece of it that really attracts us to what Monica's talking about is the opportunity afforded to us to actually, well, first of all, store space, but potentially get out of our space, be a part of the community in a meaningful, real way, and also to develop a relationship with another congregation that is not like ours. Quite frankly, that is it's been I've been at First Christian now for about 1.5 years as their senior pastor, and one of the dreams I have is for our church, which is predominantly Anglo-Saxon, to develop relationships with other folk. And so this, and whereas Monica is very active in our congregation, she's fantastic, has a lot of energy, which is, as a pastor, is just one of the things you just glom onto as hard as you can. And as far as we're concerned, it's a no-brainer, so, yeah.
I think part of, I'm a member of the congregation here, I'm also a lifelong UCCer, so, I've lived all over the United States, fortunately. My claim to fame, if I have any, is I'm a retiree from Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center, 16 years as vice president of business development, and retired. I'm going to my 7th year now. It seems like only yesterday. I'm having so much fun. Anyway, I set up my own limited liability corporation to give me flexibility, also protection from a tax standpoint. To do, I'm an entrepreneur by inertia, I guess, and I'm president of, it's called Atkinson Collaborative Enterprise, and in that name, it sort of depicts my operative mode, and that is collaboration. I'm extensively involved in this community. I'm on the board of SG Atkins, ESRI volunteer, Financial Pathways, of the Piedmont, adjunct faculty at Winston-Salem State, and part of my vision, if you will, and also as to mirror what Reverend Thatcher was saying, was to create the linkages externally for this church. I mean, this has been what are we, 121 plus years in going. Well, we're going through a process now of reassessment of how do we advance, and we are basically turning everything upside down and trying to question ourselves. Are we really fulfilling our mission, and how do we do that? I can tell you from, you talked about the garden spots. Well, S.G. Atkins has a tremendous one, and it's underutilized. I mean, underutilized in terms of so you produce the food, that's the good news. The bad news is, how do we get that food just used properly? And so I've been following the place-based model since it was initiated, and I think that, again, this is a grand experiment to try and foster collaborative activities among our many, many parts in this community. And I think it's like you say, knocking on doors, sort of inviting people in. We have a Latino and Filipino population. I'm also on the faculty at at Wake Forest, and I'm in the language and translation department, and part of the activities we have going on there is to reach out with the foreign students that we have. We had a Chinese New Year project last week at Winston-Salem State. It was, I don't know if any of you attended, it was phenomenal. We had probably 60 or 70 people there, and the majority of those were Latino, they were Hispanic, and it reflects what's happening here in Winston-Salem. And again, those people that are lifelong residents, they may not appreciate the fact that our demographics are shifting overnight. So it can't be the fine things that we did several years ago. We've got to change and be willing to reach out, experience new ideas and ways of working together. Anyway, all that said, I have supported Monica in her efforts to launch this program, and I think that it will be a partnership with the community and with each other, and I think that that's the exciting part from my standpoint. I probably shouldn't have said anything, but
Perfect. Couldn't have said it better.
that's why she had it. Anyway.
So are there,
I was just gonna say, picking up on the theme of partnership, I mean, the food pantry at Wentz is really built on partnerships, both in terms of feeding the food that comes to the food pantry. As Reverend Griffin said, we're not a part of Second Harvest, so all of the donations that we get come from the community. But also then in distributing that food, we also have a partnership with Carver High School, for example, where we support they don't have a backpack program for various reasons, but we do provide bags of grocery that the social workers distribute there. So we have relationships, even you mentioned crisis control. Crisis control will from time to time send members to the food pantry. So really, partnership and collaboration is the basis for Wentz's Food Pantry, in part because of our ministry work. We wanted to do this work as a part of the community, for the community, not away from it.
Right, that's good.
I think the one question that I feel like I probably didn't answer in where asset-based kind of, look, on a Friday night when a restaurant's running, we're not running by, it's not a democracy at a restaurant. It's just not. So I think in the formulation and the understanding, but there's just a part of me that's still gonna have a business model in a restaurant on a Friday night that we want to be able to, that functions really as the impetus for a whole bunch of other ministry activities. So I think where asset-based kind of doesn't work is when those
kind of rubber hits the road sometimes, and there's not always time for conversation when you're running a restaurant. And I don't want to mislead that that's what's going to happen on a Friday. It's not. It's just not. That conversation will happen, but it's not going to happen when we're,
In
when
the end,
people
it
are
still
waiting.
has to be a viable business.
Right, exactly, and it's gonna be, I don't wanna say my way, because it's gonna be whoever's running the show and in charge for that 4 hour, or really it's 45 minutes that it's just a mess. And that's, it becomes kind of just a specific management opportunity in that moment that is managed by one person, and it is overseen by one person, that is accountable, that all people are part of, but at the end of the day, it's that general manager, executive chef, whoever, shift manager, they are accountable for that 4 hour shift, and it is not asset based in that minute, in that time frame, in that experience, and it's just simply not. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have a vision and a shared understanding that we'll come back and revisit what happened during that, and that will then be a conversation around the table. So I think it all comes back to that, but it's gonna flex in and out of really being, classic business school kind of things that have to happen, and running a nonprofit, and those things are gonna get messy. And there's not part of me that doesn't, that is not both excited and completely and utterly, I don't know what the word would be, but it's huge. It's huge to think of what that's gonna look like in a great way, but also, there are gonna be days that falls apart. And that people, have to come back and recenter and be like, this is why we're here. And this is, maybe where we missed the mark. And that's gonna be a continuous conversation.
I think one of the unspoken or under accentuated issues that we need to be considering is education. And I'm talking about education from K through us. And a lot of times, it's not just the feeding and having regular meals and good dietary habits. It's really understanding and recognizing that this is a personal commitment to a healthy lifestyle, to healthy living. If we're gonna change the dynamics in our country of how healthcare is delivered and is affordable and is accessible, we have to change the way that we individually live, and that's gonna not happen overnight. It's gotta happen through a process, and I think that, again, these types of programs can address that in a little bitty way. It's not, out there real frontally, but I think that we can build that in to a long-term thing. Those people, those educators that are in our congregations that are interested in sort of that aspect of it could maybe be equipped to start that process in our school systems, whatever. And it can't be same old type of things, because we aren't gonna make a long-term change. I see that similar concept in our issues with poverty, and one of the areas I'm really interested in is reducing our rate of poverty in this community, in this county, and in this state. And we talk a lot about it, but we don't really, at the end of the day, and we do it in stovepipes. One organization may be doing a fantastic job, but so now you've got a job. Well, nobody's taught you the importance or the relevance of a savings account, of budgets, of, the stuff that we sort of take for granted. And we've got to address this in a more comprehensive way.
I think that's, certainly that's being relatively new to United Way. I've seen United Way and its board taking that leadership and kind of narrow down its priorities, encouraging integrated collaborative solutions. And that's something, we have encouraged in the Place Matters work and our community-wide work. So.
Right.
Does anyone else have any questions, or?
Did you have anything else for us?
Yeah, I was gonna
or-
say,
like a job interview or?
Yeah, if
Like
there's-
the reverse.
Yeah,
No,
if there's anything else that you would really want, just to make sure that we left with,
I could talk about this all day. I just really, I think, I didn't know how many people for sure were gonna be here.
we can make copies too,
So-
as long as we have one for.
So I'll give you, I have my resume, I have my card, if you have any other questions, literally this is what I came here to do.
And, yeah, I mean, I could talk about this all day, so. You guys have been pretty clear as what the process looks like and what our timeframes are, and so
That's always good for me to hear too, because we're like, are people, or is everybody on the same page, so it's good to
it's,
know.
I mean, you guys, when you redid the packet, it was really helpful.
Okay.
Although I still was like, oh my god, they redid the packet.
We have
But anyway.
We have
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm like marching downstairs. I was like, oh my god. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Okay, unless you have any other questions for me.
I would just like to say I was really intrigued and impressed by
Oh, thank you.
the way in which you thought very intelligently about how to find the mobile pantry. I liked that.
Yeah.
Not everything comes with that sustainability thought, so I appreciated reading about that.
Well, and it's, you know, for me, I guess I do have something. I think restaurants kind of run themselves once people kind of just show up and do their jobs, and if the dishwasher doesn't show up, somebody does the dishes. Like, you know that you need dishes, and servers know that they need dishes, and chefs know that, so if the most important person in your restaurant doesn't show up, somebody is just, your hostess in her heels might be doing dishes. Like, yeah, and so for me, I'm like, a restaurant will run itself if we do the right training and we put, we position it right and we offer a good service model. It will, and it's its own community. And I used to kind of say that it was church in a way that church wasn't church, We had family meals where, so for me, it wasn't a no-brainer. I can't believe it took me so long to be like, how are we gonna make this work? But one day we're sitting at, I don't remember, but I think barbecue with one of our friends, and it just kind of organically was like, oh, well, this is how we could do this. So, I'll give you this. But thanks for being flexible.
Oh,
coming over
absolutely.
here. I know that
I'm
was
sorry.
and I
Thank
know
you
it
so
probably
much.
made you guys. I know it made your drive probably longer. So.
Appreciate it, thank you so much.
Yeah, nice meeting you all. Finally, I heard voices on these conference calls. And
I will make a copy. Did you get one?
That's okay,
Okay.
I'll get a copy from you.
Okay, I will.
You can have it. I have it.
That'd be great, and I'll send it, I'll make copies of this as well.
There's my resume.
It was nice meeting you too, thanks for being here. I hated that I had to pop it back and forth, but